Good evening, good night, and good morning, everyone. This is update for May 30, 2022, day 96 of the war, end of the date update. We're gonna look a little bit more into Russian situation, specifically Russian politics and Russian economy, what's going on there. Just to be balanced, Ukrainian economy is at this point totally dead, and sort of surviving companies or businesses is rather exception than the norm. And we mentioned this probably more than a month ago. It's going to get only worse, and essentially Ukraine will be totally dependent on the foreign aid. So this is the situation in Ukraine, just to be balanced. Now let's switch to what's going on with the Russian economy and politics. So first of all, let's discuss one sort of hot news is that the European Union decided to ban Russian export of Russian crude oil to Europe. So initially, to reduce, it will start purchasing 2/3 of the volume it was buying so far, and by the end of the year, they plan to reduce that volume to 90%. So this is essentially slow motion refusal from Russian oil. It does not, in our opinion, it's totally misguided policy, and the reason for that is that Russian state redirects exports of crude oil to India and China. So, just for example, sales of crude oil to India jumped 3 and a change times from April to May, and they're gonna jump 5 times to China in June. So basically, they already contracted much larger volumes. So basically, all of that, because it's a global market, crude oil is totally global market. If one buyer refuses to buy, there is many more buyers that willing to buy, and this is a hot commodity. Everybody needs it, so there will be always buyers. Yes, Russia gets receives 30 to 40% less relative to WTI or Brent because of the sanctions and so on. So India demands basically 30 to 40% discount. Probably same is going on with China, but nevertheless, it's still probably like $70 per barrel, and the cost, production cost. In Russia, definitely not more than $20 and probably closer to $10, $15 per barrel. So there is still huge profit to be made for Russia. And it's still going to be totally profitable for them. And that will still support sort of the war effort and everything. At the same time, it will create huge problems in the developed world, because all this really means that probably price of crude is going to go up, and there are already predictions from major investment banks that it's going to hit $150 per barrel. Hopefully that's not going to happen, but that's the predictions out there. So now let's switch to other situation in Russian economy. So it turns out that payment that was supposed to be done on May 27, and many people were saying that, okay, well, Russia prepaid it. So as we discussed, yes, Russia prepaid it, and the conduit received the money, but then conduit is not allowed by the U.S. Treasury to pay money, to distribute money to the investors. So essentially, Russia is in technical default. Obviously, it has money, there's no question, but it was forced by the U.S. Treasury to go into default, into technical default. It has 30-day grace period from May 27. So most likely nothing is going to change, and it's going to turn into actual default, which is okay. Russia really doesn't care at this point, to be perfectly honest. At the same time, it has sort of repercussions in the West, and there is a large fixed income manager called PIMCO, and what they did, they basically sold insurance on the Russian debt. Then it's going to be money good, and to several investment banks. So now this PIMCO is on the hook because obviously Russian debt is not going to be money good because of this default, right? So they're going to have to pay some amount. It's probably billions. It's going to be billions on to cover losses of essentially of these investors who invested in Russian debt, basically. So who knows how it's going to affect the general financial markets? We will find out basically in a short time. So then let's actually look what's going on with the Russian economy itself. There are sort of new data was released, and their mortgage loans, in terms of the value, they dropped 3.4 times in April of this year relative to April of 2021, and then they dropped 3.2 times in April relative to March. So basically, months on months, it was 3.2, and year on year was 3.4. So as you can see, there is a huge sort of cooling down effect going on in Russian economy. And then to sort of support this is there are another pieces of news is that the Russian steel mills are reducing production of steel by 40%. That's really huge because that's a huge driver of the economy. And steel is being used in construction, which again, one of the steel mills is dropping production by 40%, and that's mostly focused on internal market, which again is the construction market. That's where the most of the steel goes, basically, and that really tells you that the whole basically real estate is turning into slow motion free fall. And then the other one is focused more on the export market, and it's also dropping by about like 38%. So essentially, the whole Russian steel industry is essentially getting destroyed because 40% reduction in your output is huge number, which probably makes those steel mills barely profitable and probably essentially loss making in pretty short order. Another piece of information from Russia that on May 28th, workers of the gold mining company called Polus Gold, that's one of the big Russian gold miner, went on strike because they were not receiving salaries since March. They were not paid money basically for their work. So all this says that the big issues are bubbling up in the Russian economy, and situation there gets worse. And sort of let's actually look now how that affects the Russian political situation. So there were always kind of within the Kremlin, there were always groups, different groups with different interests. One was called like war hawks, right? Mostly this is KGB, FSB, and not even so much military actually, which is very interesting. Mostly centered around like Putin himself. And then there were more like sort of dovish groups that were willing to kind of like work with the West and sort of have more sort of normal relationship. So that group was more centered around economy, just generally, just kind of like general big business, basically. So essentially what happened is that today was announcement that Valentin Yumashev, who used to be advisor to Putin, stepped down in April. And also in April, another prominent person left Russia. His name is Chubais. So basically these people were sort of kind of like installed by, so they were, let's say, kind of like black cardinals by Putin since Yeltsin time, which is like since late 90s, 99, basically. That's where, so basically it's like an old dynasty, like Yeltsin, right? When it was passing power to the new dynasty, Putin, they put their kind of like people there just to kind of to make sure that Putin doesn't do anything against the old dynasty, basically, right? Old power, center of power. And so he kind of stuck to that agreement. He was kind of true to it all this time, and essentially all of this more like sort of liberal minded people were centered around that, call it like old center of power, and they were near Putin. They were his advisors. They had important roles in Russian politics and everything. And so all of them were essentially squeezed out. Some left, as in case with Chubais, he left Russia. This Yumashev is probably still in Russia, but essentially as a center of power and a center of kind of like a balance within the Russian system, like Russian political system itself, all of this more dovish wing was totally squeezed out and destroyed. So now it's pretty much more or less uniform, like pro-war, war hawk type of people that's sort of, driving Russian politics, essentially. Basically, there is no counterbalance to that group in Russia itself right now. So that's kind of a little bit about the internal Russian politics. On a separate note, in terms of heavy weapons coming to Ukraine, so today was announced that Slovakia, which is neighboring country straight west of Ukraine, next to Poland, so they transferred 8 self-propelled howitzers called Susanna 2. They wheeled ones to Ukraine, and those are again 52 caliber barrel lengths, which is great. And then there was also announcement that France will either sell or transfer unknown number of Caesars, which is again self-propelled howitzers. Ukraine already has them, I think 12 of them or 18, something like that. So that's and they are also excellent 52 caliber barrel length. So this whole amount of all of this coming shortly and already received self-propelled howitzers basically puts Ukraine at a slight advantage relative to the top-notch Russian self-propelled howitzers, which we looked yesterday. I think they were C-35, so basically the long-barreled ones. So Russia has about 40 to 50 of those. Now Ukraine probably will have more than 50. So there is slight advantage in this like top-notch, in top-notch long-distance self-propelled howitzers category. There is still huge Russian advantage simply by number of cannons in all other categories, but at the same, it's just telling us that the situation slightly, very slow shifting a little bit in Ukrainian favor, and at least allows Ukraine to defend itself by not paying with human lives, by actually using heavy weapons. There's still a long way to go. It's not to say, oh, everything's great. Like, no, it's, like in total 50 units are nothing, where you have 4,000 units of all kind of calibers and, self-propelled and not self-stationary, all of that stuff. So this is just more about the trend, right? So it's still totally not sufficient, not enough. Plus, Ukraine receives M777, and hopefully it receives more. So the situation will be slowly changing to more balanced situation where Russia is not so totally outnumbering Ukraine, and qualitatively it will definitely be sort of switching in Ukrainian favor, but not right now. I'm saying this is as a long-term trend. So this is last sort of generic update. Now let's go back to our frontline walkthrough. We, as always, going to do it in a clockwise fashion, and we're going to start from the very north. Again, as always, here it's all about artillery ping pong. Russia claims some that few days there was some attack from Ukrainian side that caused deaths of Russian border guards. We're just sharing this info. We don't have information if it's true or not. But basically, the situation here around the border is totally not quiet, not calm. And, as we discussed before, Russia probably keeps this door open for future opportunity to escalate, and maybe if there is mobilization, basically to retry their attack straight on Kyiv through this area, basically later, if they decide to do full-scale mobilization or even partial mobilization. Now let's look at what's going on straight east of and northeast of Kharkiv. Situation here is again, sort of stable, right? So there is this low-intensity fighting around this village Ternova. Then Russian troops try to also attack here in this area around Liptsi, Veliki Prohody, but there was no success. It's just kind of just call it positional fighting of small groups of people here, and obviously artillery fighting for sure. So let's actually look at Izyum bridgehead and Lyman bridgehead, where so we can kind of formally announce that Lyman bridgehead was completely destroyed, evacuated by Ukrainian troops. At this point, it's non-existent. There is still bridgehead around Svyatohirsk that's remaining in Ukrainian hands. This is just a general schematic of the whole situation around with these bridgeheads. This is Izyum bridgehead here. This is Russian mechanized brigades here, and you can just think of mechanized brigades as like roughly 4,000 people. This is Ukrainian brigades here that's facing, and 14th was transferred to the Popasna area, and all of these grayed out troops were basically consolidated into smaller battle groups, and they were transferred to Popasna area essentially. That's kind of the whole point of all of this here right now. Now let's actually look a little bit closer. So situation more or less stable. The only place where Russian troops are trying to attack is this from this village Pasika towards south. So far they were not successful, but they, as we discussed, they kind of continue hammering here because this potentially opens up sort of you can kill two birds basically with one shot, right? So you force withdrawal from this bridgehead without any fighting and losing anything, and then also you can attack this group from the rear and from the flank, and essentially crumble this whole section of the front line here. So they continue here. It's not super strong. It doesn't look that they will be successful, but nevertheless they may sort of transfer troops from basically back from Popasna and so on, because as we're learning Russian command, and this is probably part of this new commander Dvornikov that was installed sometime early April, that we can clearly see a change in strategy. It's more clear, it's better. We're not saying it's great or whatever, it's definitely better. So he's trying to at least maneuver with the resources he has instead of just breaking his head against the defenses that he cannot penetrate. So at least there is some kind of intelligence there. So at this point, this place is more or less stable right now. There's not much pressure here directly on the front line, again, because they hope to get from the rear and force withdrawal from here. Russian troops essentially, we kind of mark it as if it's like totally, like this bridgehead totally destroyed. There are still some small pockets of kind of resistance of Ukrainian troops here in the forest area, but I mean it will be gone in a day or two, and it's impossible to track to that level of granularity. But essentially the Russian side is cleaned up this whole side, the eastern bank of the river essentially at this point here in this area. So let's look at the Severodonetsk salient, right? This is where the Russian command decided to focus their effort, as that's where they saw the biggest opportunity to encircle Ukrainian troops, so force withdrawal. So let's look what's going on. The northern shoulder is quiet, and there's not much going on there. Russian troops had quite a bit of success today in Severodonetsk, and essentially they squeezed Ukrainian defenders quite far. This is actually how it looked yesterday. That's what we shown yesterday. So they had like relatively small footholds in the town. But now let's look what's going on. They essentially captured was more than a half, or like probably 60%, 55-60% of the city. And technically, if you just want to look like, okay, where's the center of the city? So this kind of like avenue, like kind of like goes all the way. This is the central kind of avenue, and the sort of central section is really this area. So essentially, they control the center of this town. So and from what we're seeing, Ukrainian troops are not defending sort of fiercely. They tend to retreat pretty easily under strong, not that high pressure. So it sounds to us and looks to us that the decision was kind of made to evacuate Severodonetsk, except it's not going to be done sort of like, oh, we just leave. It's going to be with fighting, kind of like rear guard fighting, but it's definitely not a staunch defense. Nothing similar to Mariupol fighting here for sure. So by tomorrow, this front line might be even like, basically this is might be here. This is a huge production facility that's producing nitrogen fertilizers and many other byproducts that we're not even aware. But it's like one of the biggest in Europe, this producer here. So and there is actually even a straight like ammonia pipeline from Russia that goes from Russia and somewhere around this area, and probably this manufacturing facility feeds from it as well, and then it goes to Odessa. So basically, there was huge producer of nitrogen fertilizers here, and all kind of byproducts, chemical byproducts that you can produce from that. So essentially, we think that Ukrainian troops probably will lose Severodonetsk, if not tomorrow, then probably in 2-3 days. That's how it so far looks based on the recent dynamic that we're seeing and the desire to defend by actually Ukrainian troops there. So now let's look at the situation around Popasna, around this salient that Russian troops built when they tried to encircle Ukrainian troops. So far, no changes here in the most dangerous section of it, this northern section around Vasilievka, village Vasilievka, that's controlled by Russia. Russian troops tried to hit towards east here, towards Kamyshevaha today. They claim they made some progress, basically maybe like 1 kilometer more here. We don't have confirmation of that. It's possible, but we don't have any supporting sort of corroborating evidence to confirm that. So we didn't change the front line here, but it's totally possible that they may kind of like create like here kind of little wedge. This point, it does look at that they no longer trying to go north. Basically, maybe they didn't have enough forces at this point, so they at least trying to go east and try to either encircle the troops in this salient here, or try to force withdrawal from here. So basically, the size of their sort of Russian task is dropping and dropping. So if you remember, it was Donbass salient. Let's just actually go and look at this whole big picture here. So actually, let's go and forward. So first it was like, okay, let's encircle Ukrainian troops here. Okay, didn't work out. Now let's do Severodonetsk salient. Let's encircle them there. It does feel that way that also failed, but obviously not 100% certain. Now let's actually do at this point a little bit like this small tiny piece here, at least something. So it seems like the ability is definitely going down, and that's what we're saying, that I think both armies are approaching kind of like a pivotal moment where they super exhausted, and the Russian side needs to either double down by doing some kind of mobilization, or do negotiation, or use sort of unconventional weapons, right? So there on that note, there were phone conversation between Putin and Erdogan today. There were no kind of statements, anything about the negotiations with Ukraine. So it's unclear, the whole situation. So we're kind of like, it's still kind of like in the dark where it's all going. But as we mentioned, it's very clear that the political group that's sort of totally dominating political field in Russia at this point are war hawks. So it's going to be the chances of success in negotiations, we see them as extremely low, let's put it this way. At the same time, something has to happen, or just the front line will just sort of freeze, sort of to say, and become more or less stable, and essentially, it would be sort of similar to what was going on with Russian captured territories in Donetsk and Luhansk that they controlled since 2014. Maybe not. But the situation is definitely getting to some kind of like a peak, or as we call pivotal moment. Now let's actually let's have final look here again. Situation here a little bit, this southern sort of section of this Popasna salient is also stable, no changes here. So everything looks kind of frozen for now, for today. Then again, Russian troops from the 1st Army Corps trying to hit here, from the sort of trying to help the Wagner mercenaries, basically from this side. But so far it doesn't look that they have much success there. Now let's go a little bit south. So let's look what's going on straight west of Donetsk. Again, situation here is essentially stable. Artillery fire, small scale skirmishes, but nothing truly sort of earth-shattering, nothing really changing here. And this is just a closer look up around town of Avdiivka, where the Russian troops again trying to create encirclement, and so far it's not successful. So let's now look at the Zaporizhia front line. It used to be important area, especially this eastern section, because that's where the Russian troops tried to create the southern pincer for encirclement of Ukrainian troops in the Donbass salient. For a long time, this was stable situation there, so we're just going to quickly look. This is the wedge that Russian troops built in Ukrainian defenses, but now it's the situation stable there as well. This is the bigger picture of this Zaporizhia front line. Really nothing changing there. Now let's look at the situation on Kherson bridgehead, and actually let's discuss a couple of things. What's going on? What is Russian military administration doing? For example, in Kherson. So first of all, in Zaporizhia. So first of all, they found local collaborators who they installed at their puppet, call it governors of the both regions, of the Zaporizhia region and Kherson region. And then they switched the both regions to the Russian time, which is 1 hour difference from Ukrainian. Ukraine is Eastern European time, and Russia has actually many time zones, but to Moscow time, to be probably more technically correct. So now they are in Moscow time, and on top of that, they also switching them internet-wise. So basically, all of the internet routing now has been switched, and it's going through the Russian internet providers, basically through Moscow, through their Russian telecoms system. And so that's what's being done here basically today. In terms of So situation was more or less stable. We saw that the both sides are more or less in sort of balanced position in terms of the forces, and so. However, then Ukrainian army decided to do small scale, potentially large scale offensive with actually a long strategic goal, but we don't think that they have enough sort of resources and troops to execute that. So they attacked here at Davydiv Brid and crossed the river here in Donetsk. And so let's look what's going on. So far they advanced as far as this village Bruskinsky, which they liberated from the Russian forces. However, as we mentioned before, they were stopped by strong artillery fire from the Russian side, essentially, and airstrikes. And they don't even have strong Russian troops around here. So the only Russian unit is kind of like towards south, a little bit southwest of them, and it's not even able sort of to stop them. It's more like a screening unit. They mostly stop by basically artillery and airstrikes, and so they're not comfortable. Apparently, they probably suffered some losses, and they're not comfortable moving down to southeast, which we discussed before. The goal is to go all along this road. Immediate objective: capture this town Beryslav, and then go capture the dam here and capture town Nova Kakhovka, cut off this channel with the fresh water, and then potentially go along this channel down to the Crimea. And essentially that would cut off all of the Russian troops here and force basically huge pocket, huge disaster, because they would try to evacuate Kherson, cross this, and by the time they probably would lose most of their fuel, so that would be total disaster essentially. And then at the same time they would be protected by this freshwater channel from the Russian attacking forces from the east, right? Because it kind of creates very natural good anti-tank barrier. So this is probably what was kind of like the idea, but so far it looks like it was stopped in its tracks at the very beginning. Nevertheless, Ukrainian troops managed to capture villages here along the river now, so they have a bridgehead, and essentially they still control this village Bruskinsky, so there is kind of bridgehead here. So far, Russian forces, initially we saw that they're going to be bringing reinforcements to essentially destroy this, eliminate, but so far nothing is showing up. So which kind of tells us that they totally stretch here, and there's not much here. So it's kind of like looks like a stalemate. The fighting is still going on, and both sides are sort of super quiet about it because it doesn't go per both sides' plan. So nobody's sort of happy on either side with what's happening here. So we'll just continue sort of providing updates as things develop here. But potentially it could be a very good move for Ukraine, but it just doesn't look like Ukraine has enough resources to execute this, and it was stopped.